What is your I'm calling it now prediction? Story 1. Grown-up children of YouTube family vloggers will start dropping mommy dearest style exposés about their horrible childhoods, and laws will be imposed against the whole practice. Story 2. AI responses to all questions will be sponsored and yield responses that favor the advertiser rather than objective responses based on available evidence. Story 3. Mine is that our biggest threat in the next 5 years from AI isn't that it will go rogue. It's that it will soon perfect fake videos and all hell will break loose. We no longer have any arbiters of truth that a majority of the country trusts. Even science experts aren't trusted now. Fake videos of politicians and celebrities doing awful things will become the norm, and different groups will choose the ones that reinforce their beliefs. I truly think it's going to get wild. Story 4. Tech bro idea. Sell your vote. An app that legally allows you to sell your right to vote over to a company for an annual paycheck. The company then controls the vote for a decade and submits its own in blocks of millions by state. Someone will sue this blatantly unconstitutional scheme, and SCOTUS will allow it as a freedom of speech thing, and people will happily sign away their vote and forget they ever had one. The company will control over 60% of the vote eventually, and thus the presidential race for 50 years, until the billionaire CEO is kidnapped and literally eaten by protesters. Story 5. Homeschooling won't become the default, but it will be more mainstream with a wider selection of curriculums, secular and religious alike, and co-ops and homeschool-friendly communities will become easier to find. Just to clarify for the pearl clutches out there, an increase of homeschoolers also leads to an increase of resources. Homeschool doesn't mean that you're going to sit with your nose stuck in a Bible all day. There's a growing number of at-home instruction, nationally accredited programs that offer curriculums and testing that is in line with the national standard. As people utilize homeschooling more, regulations for educational quality control will also tighten up. It's basically a private school but at home and $40,000 cheaper. Doesn't mean that the sky will fall or that no one will know how to count. Story 6. Deepfakes will become so realistic that a video surfacing which shows a celebrity, politician doing or saying something embarrassing will become basically meaningless. The default reaction to a potentially embarrassing video being released will be to just always claim that it is fake. Everyone who likes that celebrity, politician will believe them and treat the video as a malicious fake. Everyone who doesn't like them will call them a liar and believe that the video is real. Everyone else will just shrug and move on. Story 7. The USA is going to have statewide or even nationwide failures in essential services like healthcare and education within the next 20 years. We've already started to see it with schools across our country. Teachers have put up with low pay and crap funding. For decades, they're criticized for having to teach curriculum given to them by the state, and schools are becoming more and more unsafe. And don't even get me started on our healthcare professionals. Lots of them have to take part-time jobs with Uber to make ends meet. And if enough people decide, well, I might make more working at McDonald's full-time, then we're going to be screwed. Story 8. In the future, generative AI technology will make fan films indistinguishable from today's big budget works, produced by big studios with real actors. We will be able to bring actors back from the dead. We'll be able to produce a documentary about George Washington starring George Washington. Related, generative AI technology will also make it possible to bring back living digital versions of the deceased that, depending on how much personal and biographical information they've been trained on, will be mostly indistinguishable from their no longer living counterparts. Story 9. World War III is currently in progress. It's just not really official and won't be for several more years before it escalates out of hand. There isn't any real acceptable end condition for the Ukraine or the Israel conflict, avoiding details. But there is no outcome where Israel is happy that it doesn't end in wider war and nuclear deployment in the region on its enemies. We cannot let Russia start annexing countries. They simply won't stop until forced by outside parties in more extreme ways. We continually allow people to provoke Iran, and our own elite political operatives in the United States constantly propose a first strike on them. We are quietly preparing in the US for all trade with China to cease completely any day, expecting Taiwan to be imminently invaded by China by bulking our own chip production capabilities. The political adversarial nature with China, when they simply wanted our investments and to participate in capitalism, is going to start a conflict with them, banning foreign-held companies and labeling them as national security threats simply because the US government doesn't exert full control is a bad message to send globally and makes us seem petulant. Climate change is here and is going to start causing horrible disasters. Now, as it worsens, it will force more conflict for people fleeing disaster and resources being destroyed. I'm not worried though, because I've learned there's nothing I can do about that, so I'm more worried about seeing the next Dune movie and enjoying my time with my girlfriend and family every day and never taking this peaceful time for granted. Story 10. Within the next 5 to 10 years, there will be a massive world economic collapse that will reset some of the recent political divide we've seen in America. All these companies buying up land will come out of this totally fine, worsening the cost of living crisis and pushing more and more people into homelessness before the US government actually steps up to do something. The US government will create work programs to keep people employed by fixing public infrastructure, but primarily solving the rural broadband issue by deploying fiber to almost every home like was done with electricity by FDR. China will be hit the hardest by the economic impact and will try their best to claw back economic power, resulting in them being responsible for a major world conflict, even if just purely economic in nature. I know it's hyper-specific, but looking at the comparisons between what was seen before the Great Depression and what we're seeing now, it's looking like we're going to see a repeat almost exactly 100 years later. Story 11. I know the Elon fans will downvote this to oblivion, but I think Tesla will go the way of AMC and other dead American automobile manufacturers within 10 years. The latest news that they're shelving the Model 2, the car that everyone wants, to work on robo-taxis, which almost no one wants, after very disappointing sales, was just the icing on the cake. My biggest issue is that, from a tech and infotainment perspective, the Cybertruck isn't much better than the original Model 3. Look at the tech and styling of any other car from 2017 to 2023 and you'll almost certainly see significant upgrades. Look at a Model 3 and the Cybertruck, and the interior is very similar, with only minor updates. They desperately need a Model S refresh, a significantly upgraded car, or something to show that they can grow, but I haven't seen it yet. I see a continuing number of ultra-minimalist singed screen interiors until sales drop to nearly nothing. Story 12. Within 5 to 10 years, we will see the mass closure of an astounding number of natural history collections. Most people think of collections as a museum the public visits, but the reality is that's a small part of what goes on at these institutions. Most of them are set up for researchers as places where reference material is stored. If I want to understand how climate change is impacting species, collections are where I go to look at the millions of records and specimens they have. Many universities are closing down their collections. Just last month, Duke University announced the closure of their herbarium, and the whispers in the field are that many universities are looking at this as a signal they should as well. Each time a collection closes, it puts strain on the entire system. The options are to either reallocate those materials to other collections, who often have their own space and money issues, or to abandon the materials, a massive waste, as specimens can be decades, if not centuries old, and provide some of the only windows we have into our past. While everyone in this field is doing their best to keep things going, the reality is that universities are undergoing a fundamental shift away from research and towards being degree mills. States pulled funding after the recession that was never replaced, meaning undergraduate tuition keeps the lights on, so that's where the priority is. As that happens, university admin looks at one of the few examples of humans being forward-thinking and instead sees a dollar sign they can cut. It's something no one is talking about, but the ramification of this will impact the fields of biology, ecology, climate science, and many more forever. Once we lose those specimens, we cannot get them back. There are no do-overs. Story 13. Society will not know how to handle all of the social progress it is making on the topic of gender. For example, there's a big push on women's economic empowerment. More women are going to college than men. There's constant initiatives for more women CEOs and managers, and in many brackets, women are out-earning men. Eventually, all of these changes will hit critical mass, and the gender war as we see it today will invert. Men will be the victims, and women the big, powerful bad guy. You'll struggle to see male CEOs and managers, and there'll have to be male-only scholarships at American colleges like we currently have for women. It sounds ridiculous, but it could be reality one day. The economic standards have changed, but the social standards have not, yet. It's still expected that men ask women out and pay for the date, broadly speaking. The historical notion that women had to marry men for economic stability will be challenged, so more and more women will prefer to have to marry men that make significantly less income than them. You'll get situations where a male forklift driver will have to ask out a female lawyer, and neither will have any clue who should pay. Even modern norms will have to be challenged and changed. The concept of chivalry and being a gentleman existed back in the 1920s and earlier, because men had the jobs and the money. Women were helpless. So it made sense for men to give them a little extra courtesy, open doors, pull out chairs, etc. Will that still exist if the average woman earns $25,000 more than the average man? Or women, broadly, hold better jobs than men? It's expected that men acquire a ring and get on their knees to propose to women. This ritual is a reflection of men being the active role in a marriage contract, and women being the prize that is won. If gender roles are rewritten, will we start seeing women buying rings for men and dropping down on one knee? Will ladies first change to gentlemen first? I assume this is also something left over from the gentleman template. Men have to be nicer to women as default, because women are underprivileged compared to men. If women suddenly become more privileged than men, does the social norm rewrite itself? So many tiny details about how we conduct ourselves around gender are built on the 1920s to 1950s, historical traditions of men bringing home the bacon. If you break and dismantle that structure severely enough, the traditions surrounding it will change too eventually. This is not some speech against the change. Just pointing out my thoughts. Story 14. Within our lifetime, we are going to see a major economic reform as automation and capitalism simply cannot coexist. Automation is too efficient to the point where we are very quickly going to push ourselves to a stasis point, where the idea that everyone can work for a living is just infeasible. Something people don't seem to understand about economics is how poor people stimulate the economy almost more than rich people do. Rich people typically hoard money or throw it overseas, but poor people almost immediately put any money they get back into the economy. When the poor people start losing their jobs and stop putting that money into the economy is going to take a drastic hit. And in turn, the rich people are going to start eventually becoming affected as well. And there's going to be a cascading failure until basically our entire country is financially ruined. We are going to have to basically revolutionize our economic system. And it's going to piss a lot of people off that we have to effectively become a somewhat socialist society. There's going to be complaints and people throwing a fit because they think that the new wave of people are just lazy or something.